So we're going to go ahead and talk about how to solve quadratics by factoring, which is something we actually did in the previous lesson. Um, in fact, I'm going to go ahead and skip the graphs. That's just a review from last time, so 1 through 3. But the last part of last time's lesson, we actually went through the process to solve these equations. So today's lesson is just a review of that without the graphing element in place. So reminder, the very first thing you need to do, let's look at this first equation, is make sure that the equation is equal to 0, which in this case it is. Second step is to factor. Now, if there's only two terms and they both have an x, then we're going to factor out an x, which means you're just dividing each one of these by x. X squared divided by x is x. 3x divided by x is 3. And that still all equals 0. Once you've done the factoring part, which is usually the hardest part, all you need to do is take each factor and set it equal to 0. So this one's just x equals 0. This other one, we've got x plus 3 equals 0. And you would just solve by subtracting 3 from both sides, and you get x equals negative 3. So those are your two answers. And typically you'll have two distinct answers. Occasionally you'll just have one. Let's go to another one. So this problem, unlike the last problem that was already equal to 0, we've got it equal to negative 9. So we've got to get that negative 9 moved to the other side of the equal sign. So you do that by adding 9 to both sides. And you've got x squared minus 6x plus 9. So notice I just kept all three terms. I just wrote them in standard form. And that equals 0. So we are now good to factor. And because there's three terms, that's when we're going to do our little x factoring we've done a lot of. So you'll do 1 times 9, which is 9. And then you find the factors of 9 that add up to the negative 6 that's in the middle. Those factors would be negative 3 and negative 3. So, and then I've taught recently that if there's a 1 in front of the x squared, you can do the fast method, which is just write the x and then write minus 3, and then write another x and write the other minus 3. Okay, so we've factored. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and take each factor, which in this case, both of them are the exact same. So I'm just going to write it once. And you're setting it equal to 0. And then we're going to solve for x by adding 3 to both sides. And there you go. This is an example where you just have one solution, but that's because the two factors were exactly the same. Okay, let's do another one. Once again, you need to make sure the equation's equal to 0, which it is. So then we factor. So there's a 1 in front of this x squared. So we do 1 times 5, which is 5. The negative 6 goes up top. And we're looking for factors of 5 that add up to negative 6. So that would be negative 1 times negative 5 gives you positive 5, but then add up to negative 6. Now once again, if there's a 1 in front of the x squared, it's one of the fast factoring techniques. So I can go ahead and write x and then minus 1 for one of them because of the negative 1. The other one would be x minus 5 because of the negative 5. That'll equal 0. So then we go ahead and write out the x minus 1 has to equal 0, and we solve for x. So we add 1 to both sides, and you get x equals 1. Same thing with x minus 5. You set that equal to 0. You add 5 to both sides, and you've got x equals 5. And there you go. That would be our two answers because they were two different factors, so you'll have two of them. Okay, let's go to one that takes a little longer. Here is an example of one where there is a 2 in front of the x squared, which means it's going to be one of the longer factoring techniques. But before we even get to factoring, you do need to make sure your equation's equal to 0. So you can do this a couple different ways. I should have said that on these other ones. It's not a right or wrong. Well, there are wrong ways, but there are multiple right ways to do this. So either you could add the 7x and subtract the 4 to both sides, or we could just subtract the 2x squared from both sides. I like to do the simplest one. In this case, 2x squared minus 2x squared is 0. These cannot combine because they're not like terms. They don't have the same exponent. So I'm going to write it in standard form with the highest exponent first. So negative 2x squared, then negative 7x, and then a plus 4. Now there's a problem. If your very first number is negative, which we haven't had, so notice this one was a positive 1 up here. This one was also a positive 1 and positive 1. So if the very first one's negative, you'll want to divide everything by a negative 1. And all that does is it just switches all the signs. So this negative 2 becomes a positive 2. The negative 7 becomes a positive 7. And then the positive 4 switches to a negative 4. Okay, so now we're set up to be able to do our little factoring technique. So you multiply the first number by the last. So 2 times negative 4 is negative 8. We put the 7 on top. And then we're finding factors of negative 8 that add up to 7. So that will be a positive 8 and a negative 1. And then, because this is a 2 in front, we're going to have to do our long route. So I'm going to rewrite that 2x squared. But then instead of positive 7x, I'm going to put a plus 8x because of this 8. And then a negative 1x because of the 1 over there. And then you keep the negative 4 the same. And then we split it on up. And we look for our greatest common factor of each pair. So 2x squared and 8x, you can divide both of those by a 2x. So I'm going to divide both of them by a 2x. 2x squared divided by 2x is just 1x. 8x divided by 2x is just a 4. Then you do the same thing for the next pair. You find your greatest common factor, which is negative 1. And we do a negative because the first number is negative. And then negative 1x divided by negative 1 is a positive x. Negative 4 divided by negative 1 is a positive 4. If you've done it right at this point, you should get the exact same factors right here. So I'm going to go ahead and write x plus 4, and then we'll write 2x minus 1. So the outside numbers go on the other one. And then the x plus 4, I'm going to set equal to 0. And I'll solve by subtracting 4. So I get x equals negative 4. And that's one of our solutions. Oops. Then I'm going to go ahead to the 2x minus 1. I'm going to set that equal to 0. And you solve by adding 1 and then dividing both sides by 2. And there you go.